Well, greetings, amazing students, and welcome back to another week. I hope you all are doing well. I've been keeping you in my thoughts and prayers as you continue throughout this semester, and so I pray that your semester is going well. So for this week, for our lecture content, we are going to be focusing on a particular topic, and the focus of that topic is going to be serving individuals with disabilities, okay? Now, the term disabilities is a common term that we hear throughout society, individuals with disabilities. That's fine, but I'm also going to present a new term for you, more contemporary term that we use in the field of psychology and social work, and that's the term diversability. So disability means something that is dis meaning less than or not able, and ability, right? So when we put those two together, we're saying that someone is unable. Now, recently, a new body of research literature has emerged, and individuals who are living with some kind of disability have started to use the term diverse ability. So the focus there and the change in the language is not so much to make the assumption that because someone is differently abled, that they somehow are less than, but rather that their ability is diversely able, that their ability is just different from someone else, okay? And so you'll hear me use the phrases disability or diverse ability interchangeably, as well as some of the content I present to you today. So we're going to discuss disabilities and serving individuals with disabilities. What we're also going to do is discuss the topic of ableism. So remember when we had that lecture on discrimination and prejudice, and I talked about how when we treat someone different based off of some sort of attribute of themselves, that is called discrimination. So when we discriminate against someone based off of their ability, right? Whether that be a physical diverse ability or a cognitive diverse ability, we will say that that is ableism when we mistreat someone based off of their ability. So we're going to discuss that, and then I'm going to put a little bit of a light of focus on serving individuals of the deaf and hard of hearing community. The reason I'm going to do that is because over the course of my career, I have had the blessing of serving multiple children and families who are members of the deaf and hard of hearing community. In some cases, that may have been children who were deaf of hard or hard of hearing, or they may have been hearing and their parents may have been deaf or hard of hearing. So I'm going to go ahead and share a little bit of that perspective as well. I'm also going to float a couple of videos your way that drive home the emphasis for today's lecture, and that will be our focus for this week, okay? So what I'm going to do is go ahead and share that screen, and we'll get started in just a second here, and we'll get rolling. Okay, here we go. So one of the key terms that I wanted to start with was, again, as I promised, we were going to discuss a term called ableism and this notion of diverse abilities, right? And ableism, as I said, is a prejudice thoughts or discriminatory actions based on differences in physical, mental, and/or emotional ability. And usually what we see is ableism is done on the behalf of able-bodied individuals, meaning individuals who do not have a diverse ability in one of these areas, okay, against people with illnesses, disabilities, or less developed skills or talents. Now, the reason we're discussing this for a lifespan development class is because individuals who are either born with a diverse ability or maybe incur a diverse ability later in life can be impacted in their development over the course of their lives. It's very complex, right? Individuals who are born with a diverse ability, maybe physical or cognitive, find life and experience life challenges in different ways as they're moving through their whole lifespan. But one of the statistics that I'm going to present to you today is to also consider that the older we get in our lifespan, as we begin to age, many individuals also inherit some sort of disability or diverse ability themselves. Our bodies change, our minds change, right? As we get older, sometimes things don't work the way they used to. And we may find ourselves throughout our lifespan inheriting, if you will, a diverse ability that we didn't have before. That can still have an impact on our development throughout our lives. And so you are going to serve clients who are maybe over the course of your career, you're actually delivering a diagnosis or treating a client who maybe wasn't born with a diverse ability, and suddenly they're grappling with the implications around being diagnosed at the age of 30, 40, or 50 years old with a diverse ability they didn't have before, right? And so this is a really relevant topic for us. Now, before I dive further into the lesson, I want to play a YouTube video for you. I want to play a YouTube video from a young man called Dylan. And Dylan is going to share his experience in a TED Talk related to growing up with a specific diverse ability. As we listen to Dylan's story, I'd like for you to keep that definition of ableism in mind. Take the notion of how others had treated Dylan in his story, and I'd like for you to consider what was the impact that Dylan felt or experienced emotionally as a result of being treated differently because of his diverse ability. Now, quick, just notice here. Dylan is from Australia. Dylan is a lively speaker, very charismatic speaker. He is known to drop a couple of curse words, so you may experience that in the video. So I just want to give you a heads up on that, all right? Let's listen to Dylan's story. And then what we're also going to do is we're going to revisit this topic of ableism and diverse abilities right after the video.
This right here is a photo of me when I was 14 years old. Now, I know what you're thinking. Dylan, mate, are you sure that's not Ryan Gosling? But unfortunately, no, this is a photo of me. Now, for a long time, I tried to delete this photo from my memory. And to be honest, do you blame me? Firstly, what the hell's going on with my hair there? I remember my mum's a hairdresser and I used to sit in the front seat of her car with a tub of gel and a hairbrush. And on the way to school every day, I would sit there thinking, Dylan, you have absolutely nailed it. I still don't understand why she let me leave the car. Also, secondly, where the hell are my eyebrows? Now, unfortunately for me, I didn't grow any eyebrows till I was 17 years old. Now, I understand that I had completely no control over that, but as you could imagine, it wasn't really helping my cause, was it? I also had braces. I also had my bed in the pantry, and I was a little bit on the overweight side. And this was really the first time in my life that I was really struggling with my disability. Up until this age, I'd never really cared about the fact that I was in a wheelchair. Everybody was young, nobody really noticed it, and everything just went along pretty smoothly. But at this stage, things started to change. People started going to house parties. Boys started kissing girls. Girls started kissing boys. Girls started kissing girls. And occasionally, boys started kissing boys. But absolutely nobody was kissing Dylan, I can tell you that much. And it was also about the first time that I really thought about myself as being weird because I had a disability. And to be honest, that really sucked. And it had a big effect on absolutely everything that I did. I started having a crap time at school. It really started affecting my sporting career as well. And for the first time in my life, I was really, really down on myself. And then the next year, in year 9, something happened. A mate of mine was having a house party. Now, this was a good mate of mine, a really good mate of mine. And previously, I'd never really been invited to that many house parties. And I thought, what a perfect opportunity to go to your first one. I'm absolutely going to kill it, and everybody will invite me to all the parties coming up ever since. Now, the invites for the party came out, and what do you reckon happened? I didn't get one. I didn't get an invite. And I remember thinking to myself, that is bullshit. Like, I'm actually really good friends with this guy. Like, how could I not be invited to his party? Anyway, I was sitting at home the day of the party and I went to myself, I just really, really want to go. Now, back in the day, when you were 15, 16, it was super uncool and lame to text a person to ask if you can come to the party. The far more badass thing to do was simply turn up and jump the fence. Now, as you could imagine, jumping, it's not really my forte. And unless I had some kind of crane or like trampoline device, there was no way in hell that I was getting over that fence. So the only way to get in was to knock on the door and go through the front. Anyway, I sat at home and I'm like, you know what, stuff it. I'm going to go, see what happens. I got to the front door, I knocked on the door, and my mate answered. And he had this really weird, shocked look on his face, like I was there. I remember thinking to myself, like, what have I done? Like, why didn't I sit at home and play Nintendo 64 like I did every other Saturday night? Anyway, he looked at me and he said, Dill, mate, I'm so glad that you came. I just didn't know if you could get in my house because I had a couple of stairs, so I didn't invite you. I remember thinking to myself, is that it? Is that genuinely the only reason that I wasn't invited? So anyway, I went in that house party, absolutely crushed it, had an awesome time. And then I remember the next day I woke up and I was really bloody mad at myself. I was really mad at myself that I let my insecurities and my embarrassment about my disability dictate the previous year of my life. I was really mad at myself that I believed this thing, this negative stigma that having a disability makes you weird and makes you different, and that's the only reason that people don't want to hang out with you. I'm really mad at myself that I didn't just grow a set of balls and have some confidence and talk to my friends and educate them about my disability. Now, the only reason I wasn't invited on that night wasn't because they didn't like me, but it was because I didn't tell them about my disability and that I didn't tell them that I could get up the stairs and it'd all be fine. I sat at home for a whole year thinking these people didn't like me, but the only reason that they did is because they weren't that uneducated about disability, and I didn't really do anything to educate them on it. So after that night, things really changed for me. Started being more social. I started getting a lot fitter. I started going out a lot more, and I even started kissing the odd girl or two. Then after that night, I made a pact with myself. I made a pact with myself to never, ever let my disability get in the way of what I wanted to do. I made a pact with myself to not be scared of my disability, but to be rather embrace it in everything that I did. And because of that, I've been able to live a truly, incredibly awesome life. In 2008, I was lucky enough to win a gold medal at the Paralympic Games playing basketball for Australia, wheelchair basketball, believe it or not. Now, this was incredible for me. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to go to the Paralympic Games. And the Paralympics, for anybody that doesn't know, is the pinnacle of elite sport for people with disabilities. But there's actually, a lot of people don't know the true meaning of the word Paralympic. The word's actually split in two. The Olympic part, which represents the Olympics, the pinnacle of sport, and the para part. Now, there's a common misconception that the para part actually means paraplegic or paralysed. But this isn't the case. The para actually represents parallel, meaning the Paralympics runs parallel or alongside the Olympics. Same gold medals, same venues, same elite athletes, same time. The only difference is obviously we all have disabilities at the Paralympics. Now, this was awesome in Beijing for me. I was 17 years old at the time, so I was actually still doing my HSC or my VCE while I was over there. And to be 17 years old and sit on top of the podium with 12 of your best mates, guys that had lost limbs to cancer, other guys that had horrific accidents on their work sites and were lifted up in wheelchairs, other guys that had car crashes and never be able to walk again and lost loved ones in the process. To sit on top of that podium and so proud of what we had done, singing that national anthem with tears in our eyes, it was the best thing that's ever happened to me. It really was incredible, and it's something that I'll cherish forever. I've also got a bit of a name for myself as the dude that crowd surfs in his wheelchair at festivals. Now, I've been very lucky to travel around the world, attending a bunch of different music festivals, and everybody knows me as, oh man, you're that guy that crowd surfs in his wheelchair. Now, to be honest, the first time that I ever did this was completely out of necessity, because I was sick and tired of sitting in the mosh pit and looking at all your asses all day. You don't understand how much that sucks after a while. But from the first time I did it, I was absolutely hooked. It's an incredible feeling sitting on top of that crowd in what I like to call the best seat in the house. And to be honest, it really is incredible. I think it's a really cool metaphor for people with disabilities as well. You know, what they can really do, getting out there and breaking the mould and doing what's unexpected of them. And on a side note, I've only fallen out once, and don't worry, I didn't get any more disabled from the fall, so it's all good. Now, when I reflect on my life, I think back to when, I'm really happy that I can sit here now and think that all this stuff almost didn't happen to me. I remember back when I was 14, I think of 14-year-old Dylan, and I think, you know, I had this really low expectations of myself of what I could achieve. And I let that dictate, you know, what I did in everyday life. I think back to 14-year-old Dylan, who thought of his disability as this really shitty burden that was really, really hard to overcome. I think back to 14-year-old Dylan, I think, man, I'm so lucky to be doing what I'm doing these days. I'm so glad that I could challenge my own perception about what I thought about disability. And to be honest, I can sit here in front of you all today and tell you 100% honest truth. If I ever had the chance to go back in time or eat some kind of magic pill and walk again, there's no way in hell you could ever pay me enough to do it. Because I absolutely love everything that's involved in my life, wheelchair or not, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But unfortunately, there are so many kids right across the world and all around Australia that are really struggling socially because of their disabilities. Disability remains this thing that nobody really wants to talk about. And there's still this negative stigma that having this disability is this weird, unlucky, really ugly thing. And for kids with disabilities that don't have any confidence, it's really, really hard for them to get over this and get into the world and do what they want to do. And it really restricts everything that they want to achieve. Now, there are heaps of problems in the world. Poverty, refugees, same-sex marriage, gender equality. They're all very, very important things. But when the hell do you ever hear anything about disability? Or when do you ever turn on the TV and see the first news story about somebody with a disability? Or when do you turn on your TV and see a wheelchair TV presenter? Sorry, a presenter in a wheelchair. Or somebody with cerebral palsy in our parliaments. Or an actual blind actor playing a blind actor, as opposed to some bloke who's just closing his eyes. Now, I remember when I was a kid, when I was struggling, when I was 14, I just wish I could have turned on my television and seen a guy in a wheelchair achieving. Because would have made me realise that, you know what, I could do that too. That one day could be me. I wish I had a positive role model in the media where I could have seen somebody absolutely killing it, and that would have instilled the confidence in me to get out there and do whatever I want. I think it's really important moving forward that we as a society change our perception of disability away from this idea that it's this really bad, unlucky, weird thing, and stop being so scared to talk about it. We need to realise that it's okay to have any disability, and we need to further our expectations of what people with disabilities can really do. And moving forward, I think that in order to do that, we need a mainstream disability. Get people with disabilities into our mainstream media, and that will increase the visibility in a positive light. We need to make disability heaps more commonplace, and we need to start the conversation about it, which will go a long way in normalising it. And then, who knows, maybe one day if we can do that, these kids like me, like I used to be, won't be going through such a tough time. They won't be embarrassed about their disability ever again. And they'll have the confidence to go out there and do whatever they want. But as a society, we really have to hope that they pick a much better haircut than that. Thank you.
All right, let me stop the video there. I want to thank you all for tuning in and watching that video. I wanted to show you that TED Talk for a particular reason. And it's because it's so important that we take time when we're discussing some of these topics to pause for a moment and hear the perspective of others from their eyes, from their lenses, right? And so Dylan's story of sharing about his diverse ability, his disability, being reliant upon a wheelchair at a very young age, I believe spoke really well to our topic, right? I like us to consider the term diversability because that's the language that we're using. You still hear disability, you still hear those terms. It's just in the fields of psychology and social work, they're starting to migrate in that direction. And if you heard, Dylan described his experiences, right? During his testimony, his feeling is he was struggling with his own self-image. He felt at points that he was ashamed, right, of his own identity. Remember that term when I said ashamed, the difference between guilt and shame? Shame was him feeling like he was less than as a result of his own diverse ability that he had no control over. He wanted to be involved in social norms, but he was having feelings of depression and anxiety about how to engage with his peers and engage in a discussion around it. So you can see that the impact on Dylan's development throughout his lifespan changed, right? What appeared to be a difficult discussion for him early on in his life, he was able to kind of reframe in his mind that this wasn't a disability, it was a gift, right? And he was channeling that gift, and it motivated him to live this rich and fulfilling life, participating in the Paralympics and crowd surfing at concerts, right? But the idea is that many of your clients that you may experience with a diverse ability are still in the stage of finding themselves and experiencing what it's like to live with a diverse ability with the judgment, right, or awkwardness of others in society. So I thought it's important to start with that bit of topic for today. I'd like to dive into the topic of providing a few statistics related to individuals with diverse abilities. The reason I want to do this is because it's important to understand that there actually are a large number of individuals that are living with some sort of disability, whether it's visible or invisible, because some cognitive diverse abilities we do not see upon initial glance of the person. And there's actually some patterns that we see throughout the lifespan related to individuals with diverse abilities. So I'd like to share those for you. There was a survey done, the American Community Survey, that estimates that the overall rate of people with diverse abilities in the US population in 2020 was 12.6%. That's a pretty large percentage. 12.6% of the total population in the US has some sort of diverse ability. Now, the state, I just thought this was interesting. The state with the lowest percentage of people with disabilities in 2020 was Utah, with 9.9% of its population. The state with the highest percentage of people with disabilities was West Virginia, with almost twice the high percentage of 19.4%. I don't know all the details around why that is, but I thought I'd share that because it matters in where you are practicing in your future career as a nurse or a speech pathologist, right? The region that you're working in may lend itself to having a larger population with diverse abilities. So you may find yourself specializing in this area. Now, rates of a diverse ability increase with age. This is what I was telling you at the beginning of the lecture, right? So in 2020, less than 1% of individuals under 5 years old had a diverse ability. Okay, so we see that in life, right? The younger we are, chances of statistically less diverse abilities across the total population. Now, look what happened as time went on, as people moved throughout their lifespan. For those ages 5 to 17, the rate increased from 1% to 5.4%. For 18 to 64, the rate was 10.5%. And for people 65 and older, 35% had a disability at some time. What does that mean for your patients? The older your patients are getting, the more likely that they are going to experience having a diverse ability in their life. Also factor in that the older you get, the chances are, right? And when we look at the statistics here, you may also encounter a diverse ability in your own life. In 2020, the US population with disabilities, over 51% were people working class ages of 18 to 64, while 41.2% were 65 and older. Disability in children and youth accounted for only 7.2%. So what does this mean? It means that individuals who are in their lifespan, the majority of those individuals with diverse abilities were working age, right? So they're not only combating some of the social, emotional challenges that Dylan experienced, right, that he was describing, but they're also trying to either go to school, to maintain employment, to earn a career, right, to move up in their career. So it compounds, right, this experience of the challenges faced throughout their lifespan. I want us to give us some tips, right? Because if we don't live with a diverse ability, if you are able-bodied or able-minded, as what the term is, if you don't have a diverse ability, it's hard sometimes for us, it's easy for us, let me put it this way, to forget that there are challenges associated with individuals like Dylan who maybe have a diverse ability that's visible, or an individual who has a cognitive diverse ability. And so we may inadvertently, with good intentions, make mistakes and not fully see or understand the person's experience with that diverse ability who's in front of us. So I want to give some examples of ableism that can float around out there, even from good intentions, right? Just because we think that sometimes if it's not a problem for us in our lives, it's not a problem at all, right? And we make the mistake of forgetting that 12.5% of the total population is living with a diverse ability, many of those working age. So some things for us to keep in mind, right? When we're working with an individual with a diverse ability, we want to avoid assuming that the individual's diverse ability is a fluke or an embarrassment in their life. For some individuals with a specific diverse ability, right, they may look at their lives and they say, you know what? It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't an embarrassment. In fact, the diverse ability has been a blessing in my life. I wouldn't change it if I could, right? If you look at asking, you don't want to avoid asking what happened to you, or say things like, oh, I can never deal with that. You may be curious about an individual and how they came to inherit that diverse ability. The thing is, in your practice, if it's not medically relevant, right? If you're just personally curious and it has nothing to do with their diagnosis or treatment, the recommendation is we don't want to ask that question. What it inadvertently signals to the individual with that diverse ability is you see their diverse ability first before you see them as a person. You see the wheelchair first, or you see the crutches, right? Or you see the sign language, or whatever the case is, but you don't see them as a person. When you say something like, I can never deal with that, right? Well, that is kind of difficult for someone with that diversity to hear, because they're saying, it's not like I chose to deal with this either, right? I deal with this every day because this is my reality. So when you say you can't deal with it, right, it kind of makes me feel like I'm less than in that sense. We all want to avoid assuming that an individual is making their diverse ability seem worse than it actually is. If we haven't walked a mile in their shoes, we can't assume that we know what it's like to live their life every day. And sometimes people have this desire or lack of, you will, of patience with individuals with diverse abilities, and they expect individuals to say, hey, catch up to the rest of the group. We're not going to slow down to accommodate your diverse ability, whether that's cognitive or physiological or whatever the case is, visible or invisible. And so when we communicate these things, we are communicating, we're treating someone different based off their diverse ability. We're communicating to them, even if our hearts are in the right place, that they don't belong to the same extent. And so sometimes we make assumptions in our life, if we are able bodied individuals, about life, and we assume that our experience is the experience of others. I'm going to give you some examples of what we may find ourselves as able bodied that we may not consider unless we were in the shoes of someone with a diverse ability, right? So think about when you go out and about, can you easily arrange to be in the company of people of your physical ability? Think about a friend that calls you up, on a Friday night and says, hey, I got 2 tickets to a movie. You want to come? If you're able to say, yeah, I'd love to be there, I'm going to hop in the car, drive to the theater, dash on in and meet you there, that's one thing, right? But if you are relying upon a wheelchair or crutches, or maybe you have a diverse ability where you walk a little slower than someone else, you have to kind of consider, can I make it there in time? Will there be parking available and accessible to me? Is it a 2-story venue? Does it have wheelchair access or a elevator or something like that? Think about if you can get inside all your buildings using the main entrance. If you're able-bodied, you think about, I'm running late for class, I'm going to dive into this building, right, and just jump in so I can make it into class. But if you have a mobility challenge, you may have to consider, is there a wheelchair lift? Is there a ramp? Do I need to take a second separate entrance? Where is that entrance located? Will that add time? If I need to park in a handicap parking spot, how long is it going to take me to get from that spot to campus? It may not be as close, right? Things to consider. Think about if you needed to move. Can you easily be assured of purchasing housing or renting an apartment where you have access to that apartment? Think about older apartments, areas of LA, right? The Inland Empire, where even though we've added accessibility for individuals with diverse abilities, ramps and things like this, it doesn't mean that the rest of the building has been upgraded to that point. Sometimes there's doorways that need to be expanded. Sometimes even though there's a elevator present, a wheelchair lift present, it doesn't mean it's always in working order. So you have to consider carefully, where am I going to live? Where are the areas around me, like the entire neighborhood? Can I access that, right? Where's the local grocery store? Where's the gas station? Where's the local mall? Because if I need to go out, I need to consider the time it's going to take and the energy for me to do that. Can you assume that when you go shopping alone, you're always going to have appropriate accommodations to make the experience hassle-free? Can you reach all the items on the top shelf? Would you be able to see as you walk down the aisleways, not aisle, the aisles, not only the clothes or the items that you're shopping for, but the people that are walking around you? Would they be able to see you? So these are the implications, the considerations, right, that we want to be able to have as practitioners when working with individuals who are diversely abled. Just because it isn't a problem for us does not mean that it's not a problem for someone else, okay? So now I want to move on to serving individuals who are from the deaf and hard of hearing community. Now, the reason that I share this is because over the course of my career, I had the pleasure of serving several families, children and families, who are from the deaf and hard of hearing community. And I learned a lot from these families. These families were extremely kind, gracious, patient, amazing educators, right? And teaching individuals who are not from the deaf and hard of hearing community how to more effectively serve. And I thought to myself, there's a reason why I want to do this. Here in Riverside, we have the California School for the Deaf. And that's a large hub, a large venue where families from all over the country come to study and engage in education that is geared towards serving the deaf and hard of hearing community. So if you intend on practicing medicine or speech pathology within the Inland Empire area, especially within Riverside, you may encounter individuals from the deaf and hard of hearing community. So I thought I'd share what I learned, right, about this community with you in the hopes that you'll also learn more and have a more effective, well-rounded practice when serving individuals with diverse abilities. Now, currently in the US, there are about 35 million deaf people in the US. I bet you we didn't know that that number was that high, right? That's a very high number, 35 million individuals. Around the globe, all right, there are about 100 million individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. Now, deaf individuals, like I said, often travel from to Riverside due to the high number of individuals who live in the community, who gain an education from CSDR, all of those other things. Most deaf refugees in the area of Riverside come from Latin American countries where the deaf are often abused and oppressed. When we think about how we treat one another and ableism and how we may do that in the US, a deaf or hard of hearing individual may say my life is difficult and I am in fact treated differently in the US as a result of my diverse ability. What we also see in other countries is that the deaf and hard of hearing community also face disproportionate rates of abuse due to communication barriers. They're seen as easy targets and they're often seen as less than in society, right? This ableism occurs on a systemic level. And so individuals at times may migrate to Riverside from Latin America because of the education and the large number of individuals from the community that live here. Um, the other thing to consider is sometimes individuals from the deaf community have experienced disproportionately higher levels of abuse or neglect in their lives because they were seen as easy targets, because if they hadn't learned to sign, they couldn't communicate necessarily the abuse that had taken place. Okay. Now, also consider that deaf and hard of hearing people also suffer from some of the other most severe forms of abuse, such as human trafficking, right? If you haven't been raised and provided with the education to communicate with others, it's easier to target those individuals to engage in other criminal acts, okay? And so I want to just share this. This is a consideration for us as health practitioners. Now, over the course of my career, I've learned a few things from families of the deaf and hard of hearing community that helped me in my case management. And I thought it might be nice to share those with you. So I want to share those. There used to be a term way back in the day that was referred to some members of the community as deaf and dumb. And it's an old term that we do not use now and is considered an insult in the deaf community. Deaf meaning that we don't hear, but when we say someone was dumb, we may also say that as a result, there is an assumption that simply because they cannot hear, they're not on the same cognitive plane as able-bodied individuals. That can be entirely incorrect. Just because someone is deaf does not mean that there is a cognitive disability as well. And so we don't want to use that term. In fact, all of the families that I worked with, there was no cognitive diverse ability present. They simply just were deaf, okay, in that case. Deaf and mute is sometimes a term that is accepted, mute meaning that we do not speak verbally. Okay, in that notion, that's an okay term. When you're interacting with someone from the deaf or hard of hearing community, you want to maintain eye contact with the individual. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's also a sign of respect. When you're communicating with someone, right, you want to give them the attention of eye contact. That's just the kind thing to do. But in addition to that, many individuals from the deaf community may also rely on lip reading in order to communicate with you. And so if you're not making eye contact, if you're looking away, right, in either direction, or you're trying to engage with someone and you're constantly looking around in different locations other than at the individual, it will make it more difficult for that person to lip read and to communicate with you. So we want to be able to provide the same opportunity to communicate to our deaf and hard of hearing brothers and sisters. Now, to gain an individual's attention, right, of the deaf and hard of hearing community, you may calmly wave at a person in their field of vision, right? You want to get their attention. You can kindly wave like this. But you don't want to frantically wave your hands, right? Because that indicates something's wrong. And I know sometimes we do that with our friends, right? Like we're getting our friends' attention or something. We're like, hey, hey, and we're waving like this, and we don't think anything of it. But it's a different form of communication with an individual who's deaf or hard of hearing. So you don't want to do that. You just want to gently wave and say, hey, eye contact. Can I speak with you for a second? Now, you also don't want to grab or poke the deaf person from behind to get their attention, because this is also a sign of a potential emergency. It can raise alarm in that individual. So something that may help you. Now, I know this sounds very simple, right? But when I was working with a family, it was my first family that was working with was deaf and hard of hearing. In this case, the child, it was a single mother and her child. And the single mother and the child were both deaf. They lip read very well. And I had an interpreter who was working with the family as well. And I was young, right? I was like 22 years old. And when I was working with this family, I realized we scheduled a lunch meeting like later that week to catch up and talk about the case plan. And I remember the night before the meeting, the lunch meeting, I woke up in the middle of the night in this panic. And I thought to myself, I said, why, Antonio, did you schedule a lunch meeting like for this? Your family that you're serving is deaf and hard of hearing, and we're going to go to a restaurant and we've got to order off the menu and interact with the servers and all of these other things. Now, some of you may be saying, why would you worry about that? Right? Like, why would you be panicked about that? Others of you have been saying, oh my gosh, yeah, how is that supposed to look? Well, 22-year-old me, naive me, right? Uneducated me in this sense, in this practice, made this false and really sort of closed minded assumption, right? They're deaf and hard of hearing. They can read, right? These individuals can read. They can point to the menu to articulate to the server what item they would like to order. This isn't the first time this family had gone to a restaurant. They've survived this long, right? They've gone out into public. And yet, me being able bodied, it was an unintentional form of ableism where I made this really weird false assumption, right, about the ability of my clients. And I show up to this lunch, the interpreter, everyone, we all sit down at the table, we start ordering. I watch the family order, they point to the menu, they sign thank you to the waiter. The interpreter's ordering as well. We had a normal lunch just like anyone else, right? But because I wasn't educated in this matter at the time, right, I potentially missed an opportunity, right, to include a client. Now, thank God that didn't happen, but at the same time, I don't want you to struggle in that way. So that's why I'm sharing the information. You don't want to initiate a conversation with a deaf person on how they lost their hearing. Again, because just similar to what I was talking about before in the previous slides, it implies that you don't see the person as a whole. Rather, you see them as inferior because of their diverse ability. Over the course of working with many of my families, they chose to share that information with me. Sometimes some of our kiddos, they were born deaf. In some cases, they lost their hearing due to rare illnesses or even viruses. I've worked with individuals who are in their 30s or 40s and they lost their sight or their sense of hearing due to a disease that occurred later in their life. And they're learning how to communicate, to navigate the world, right, as a result of that. So we don't want to lead with that. We don't want to ask that question if it's not diagnostically or medically relevant, right? If we don't have anything to do with treatment or diagnosis, we don't want to lead with that question. And when communicating with a deaf person, you don't want to stand in bright light with the sun behind you. Why do you think that is? It comes back to the lip reading, right? Let me give you one more thought around that. So if you notice, I have a big beard, right? It's very thick. And you see how the top of the beard, it covers my top lip. Um, I grow that out now because it's just a fashion thing for me. I like having a beard, right? But when I worked with members of the deaf and hard of hearing community in my younger days, I didn't have the beard as long. And the reason for that was because when you're communicating with a member of the community, lip reading is very important. And in addition to that, facial expression is important, right? If you're laughing or you're excited or you're upset, that allows the individual to see your facial expressions and be able to communicate with you more efficiently. And so I chose to have a very, very short mustache, one where you can see my full lip underneath. And I shaved this down very low so that you can see the inflections, the facial expressions a little bit better, right? So we do these things for our clients because we want to communicate to them that we love them, that they're important, that they belong, and that we care, right? And so I thought I would share this information with you because it really makes the big difference, the biggest difference in the lives of those that we serve with diverse abilities, okay? So I'd like you to kind of consider, right? Just some lessons, a summary of today's lessons, right? We want to make sure that we don't forget in our able-bodiedness or able-mindedness that we sometimes carry blind spots. We want to avoid the notion of thinking if it's not a problem for me, it's not a problem for my patient or my client. Individuals with diverse abilities face open and hidden challenges daily that amplify normal levels of frustration and overwhelm, right? What we think would be an easy trip to the store for an individual with a diverse ability may take all their energy and most of their afternoon to accomplish that same shopping trip. We have to be empathetic to that reality. Considering what our neighbor might be experiencing as challenges that we may not see will enable us to be more effective in our professional roles, which is why I'm sharing that with you today, okay? Now, before we leave and engage in our centering, I want to leave you with one last message, which I think is a really powerful one that I want to share with you, and it blends with our spiritual obligation, right? On the picture is a screen here of Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers from the show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I know it's been a while since that show has aired. Mr. Rogers has since passed, right, in that time. Some of you may have still grown up watching reruns of the show. This show was on when I was a kiddo, and I watched this show quite a bit. I was a big fan of Mr. Rogers' show. This is a young boy in here named Jeff, and as you can see, Jeff has a diverse ability. Mr. Rogers' show was a really powerful show in several ways. A lot of people really hold Mr. Rogers in high esteem because by all accounts, the people that personally knew Mr. Rogers, they said that this man was as kind as he was on screen as he was off screen. He was the same kind man, that he always saw people and particularly had a heart for serving children. He was just the nicest man ever. Well, what a lot of people don't know is that Mr. Rogers was also a person of faith. He was an ordained Presbyterian minister. And so Mr. Rogers, even though he was seen as this nice man, if you look at the topics that he discussed, they were very difficult, even spicy topics for the time of the show. Mr. Rogers' first show that was aired covered the Vietnam War. And he discussed with children how to process the feelings and the images of war that they were seeing on the screen. Over the course of his career, Mr. Rogers on his show discussed difficult topics like divorce, racism, right, and even diverse abilities. And he always did it in a way that if you listen closely to the show, you'll see these little nods to his faith emerge. Well, there was one show that occurred, and there was a clip, an interaction between Mr. Rogers and Jeff here that I want to show to you. I want to show this to you because I want you to think of Dylan, and I want you to think of all the individuals that you might serve in your career who have a diverse ability and are just asking, will you be able to see and interact with me in the same enthusiasm and with the same love that you interact with others? And so I want to show you this video because it's a beautiful example of how we can honor the dignity of an individual in a very simple and meaningful way. So I'm going to go ahead and let me share my screen, make sure I got sound in there good. Let's watch this video clip and let's prepare to close out our lesson for today.
We wrote because Jeff was going to have spinal fusion and be in a what they call a halo,
cast,
a metal
cast.
rim, and then cast on his shoulders and bolted
All the way down
together.
his trunk.
And, yeah,
We
he may
weren't
not
sure.
have survived the surgery. And so we said, you know, what would you like to do? This is going to be a really big task for you, and so we want to kick it off with something that would be really special.
Mr. Rogers?
Hey, Jeff. I'm glad to see you.
Hi.
Thank you very much for coming by. Can you tell my friends what it is that made you need this wheelchair?
Sure. Well, when I was about 7 months old, I had a tumor, and it broke the nerves to tell my hands and legs what to do.
I see.
And I got a wheelchair when I was 4 years old.
That was your first one when you were 4.
Uh-huh.
He told Jeff before they started that they would have a chat and then sing a song together.
I think he said we might sing a song. I
Yeah,
remember because
yeah.
I mean I was sort of surprised. What, he's going to start singing a song? Well, you know, this is totally not even what song.
It's you I like. It's not the things you wear. It's not the way you do your hair. But it's you I like. The way you are right now. The way down deep inside you. Not the things that
I do.
not your fancy chair. That's just beside you. But it's you I like. Every part of you. Your skin, your eyes, your feelings, whether old or new. I hope that you'll remember, even when you're feeling blue, that it's you I like. It's you yourself. It's you. It's you I like. And it is you I like, Jeff.
Thanks.
And there must be times when you do feel blue.
Uh-huh.
I'm not feeling blue right now, though.
Me neither.
I'm so glad that you came today.
Thanks.
I remember asking one of the staff people that was there, well, you know, what do you think? Did it go okay? So, don't. This is good. This is good.
He had his surgery, he survived. Certainly, Mr. Rogers had an impact on who Jeff became, his sense of self.
You hear the last lines, which I love, of that clip, right? It had an impact on who Jeff became. This is why we're talking about this topic in the context of lifespan development, right? We don't always know who we're going to encounter. We don't always know what will come of those encounters. But we do know that for the time that we have a client in front of us, whatever their background, their diverse ability, whatever the case is, it's an opportunity to honor the inherent dignity of that individual. What a beautiful example, right, of Fred Rogers coming and kneeling beside, or just squatting beside Jeff, having a conversation on his level, allowing Jeff to tell his story without speaking over him, right? And engaging him in a song where the lyrics are saying, it's you I like. It's not all of this other stuff around you. I see you, in essence, the same way that God sees you, for who you are, and that's enough for me. Imagine how beautiful, right, that messaging was. Now, later on, I want to tell you in that story, what happened is that later on in Fred Rogers' career, when he was very old, before he passed away, he had earned the Lifetime Achievement Award. And when he was at the ceremony, he was being recognized for this award. He received his award, and individuals surprised him. Jeff had survived the surgery and it was actually still alive. He was an adult now. And Jeff surprised him by going up on stage, and they hugged and they embraced. And Fred Rogers was crying and Jeff was crying. And it was just this really beautiful full circle moment, right, of seeing someone the way God sees them, right? So I wanted to share that with you today. And to ring home true to that, here's that tried and true scripture verse that we use throughout this class. For as in one body, we are many parts, right? And all the parts do not have the same function. So we, though many, are one body in Christ and individually parts of one another. This is a perfect example of where two individual people from very different walks of life came together as one body of Christ. And since we have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us exercise them. Let us use them, right? All right. So for today's centering scripture, what I'm going to do is we're going to focus on Exodus chapter 14, verse 14. I love this particular scripture verse. It says, "The Lord will fight for you. You have only to keep still." At this point in the semester, I'm probably right in assuming that things are pretty busy for you. You know, you've got exams, you've got labs, you have pressures of school and work and home, personal lives, right? All of these things going on in your busy lives as a college student, and it can feel overwhelming at times. What God's reminding us in Exodus, right, is that He's always here. He's always here in the background, fighting for you, calling for you, telling you He loves you. You just have to take a moment to be still enough to hear God's calling, right? And so to hear God saying to you, "I've got you," right? "We've got this," right? But just be with me, hear me. And so that's what we're going to do, right, for our centering for this day. We're just going to give ourselves a moment to be still enough to hear God saying to you, "I'm going to fight for you. You have only to keep still." So let's go ahead and be still, and let's go ahead and put our hands and feet in a nice comfortable position. Let's go ahead and take that nice deep breath and close our eyes. And as we exhale, let's draw into God's presence. He's here with us right now. He's here alongside you. He's hearing all of your concerns, and He's saying, "Give those to me." Take a nice deep breath and hear Him say, "I'm going to fight for you. You just have to be still." And go ahead and exhale. And let's stay with that moment for just a few moments. Okay, go ahead and take that nice deep breath and open your eyes and come on back. All right, folks, I want to thank you again for another great lesson, another great week. Feel free to reach out if you need anything. I'm here. All right, take care. God bless.